so this album is also your first gold album in Canada. Do you feel
Yeah.
the same way with a gold album as you feel with a hit single on the radio? It is what it is.
No, the Gold album was definitely nice, and you know, I I think maybe that's our best record. That to me, it's the midpoint. It's before we went really pop punk, and I feel like there's just a lot of good songs on that record, and I also feel like I remember having a rough mix or an unmastered mix and playing it for um, uh, uh, Brendan McGuire, who was a sound guy for Sloan at the time. He recorded the Sloan Between the Bridges album, and I was playing him a song, and he said, finally a, a producer that knows how to make Greg's voice sound good, because he songs like Friend of Mine and was it Shorefire maybe? I can't remember now, but it's everyone sounded good on that, and that was our first time working with a big producer, Lou Giordano. We spent 3 months in Boston, and it was a great time. It was this really cool studio called Fort Apache, and first time like having just amazing gear. Like, oh, here's a 12 string. Oh, here's a Vox AC30. Wow, though that sounds really good together.
Yeah, one thing that stands out with that album is there is a more polished, more commercial sound. That has to do with a bigger budget from a major label, that you're in a better studio, better engineers, producers, mixers, better equipment. Is that, I guess that's the reason behind
and
it?
also, I think that album and the subsequent two albums with Matt Hyde, taught Greg and I both how to be a producer. So having an outside ear is so important. It's funny because I have the same thing with bands now. There was one of the songs, I can't remember, but one of the mid-tempo songs of mine on Maybe It's Me, I Don't Know it's called, and we played it for Lou, and Lou said, this thing you're calling the chorus, that's not the chorus, that's the bridge. This thing that you think is the pre-chorus, that's the chorus. And I went, no, you're crazy. And I went, oh yeah, you're totally right. This is better. That bridge should only, what we're calling the chorus should only happen once. And I've done the identical thing with bands today, because when you're a young band, you may know how to write melodies, you may know how to write a whole song, but you don't have that depth of knowledge about how songs work and how to make them better. And Lou was great at that. He was like, that's what I do today as a producer. Like, I tell people, I just take the parts that are good, and I want more of that, and take the parts that are bad, I want less of that.
You're like carving a sculpture and taking the best stuff that's in there. So the song Red was re-recorded for this album, released as a single, becomes a top 20 single. It's one of Treble Charger's signature songs. It's my favorite Treble Charger song. And I have two things I got to share. And you've probably already heard this, but Red placed at number 8 on the greatest Canadian songs of all time in 1996 by the music magazine Chart. And then the CBC had it on their list of the 50 best Canadian songs of the 90s. So some pretty big accolades. What was the decision to re-record and re-release that one song as a single? Out of all the other songs that had come before it, that's the one that was chosen.
Well, I think, the song's a bit of an albatross for me, because it's literally one of the first songs I written. Like after the bad album that we ditched that I mentioned, I Red must have been one of the 3 next songs that I wrote. And we love that early version. It has a very bad sounding a Big Muff solo on it that I wasn't so crazy about, but it had a certain thing to it. I feel like the vocal might be a little stronger than the re-release, but it kind of worked out poorly for us having it, because it was, people in Toronto heard it all the time, and Toronto rules the music industry. So when we re-recorded it and re-released it, the city of Toronto was like, well, we've heard this before, we're not going to play. So, and Toronto radio country, so because they were a little less than enthusiastic, I feel like it could have been a bigger single than it was. But when the indie version was never heard in the other parts of the country, and then that version was mostly heard in the other parts of the country. But what are you going to do? I think everyone at RCA, they're like, there's no way you're not putting this on. Like, and we're like, okay, cool.
Yeah, it's such an undeniable song. Do you as a guitarist, do you have like an app on your phone or a hard drive on your computer that just has all these guitar riffs and guitar ideas that you can go to and pluck from? Or are you like some of my other guests where it's all up in here?
Yeah, not then. I don't think I did. I do that a lot now. But yeah, back, I don't think I did that at all then. I think I just,
well, it hasn't been that long that we've had, phones that have apps capable of that, and even computers, Pro Tools and all that. Before, if you wanted to record anything, you had to get to a studio and pay big bucks.
Well, I always had 4 tracks. So I would probably, starting with Maybe It's Me, I would do 4-track demos.
So for our listeners that like the equipment side of music, are you able to share the guitars that you use, the pedals you use, the amps you use to get kind of your signature sound? Yeah,
well, my sound for the first 2 Treble Charger records was I mean, I have a Fender Stratocaster that I bought in 1989, which is my kind of my main guitar. I also had a Charvel Surfcaster around that time. I used that a lot. But I used a Boss pedal called the Metal Zone.
Good name.
It's a lot of people think it's the greatest pedal ever, and a lot of people think it's one of the worst sounding pedals ever. And I remember when Matt Hyde, our producer, when he said, wow, you use the Metal Zone in the way you're not supposed to use it, because you're supposed to do metal with it. And it had this very extensive EQ section where you could dial out that mid-range to get that horrible scooped metal sound. But I was just trying to get a Neil Young Crazy Horse sound. So I reefed that mid-range, and that's the distorted sound in Red and in everything. So just either the Charvel or the Strat into a Fender amp with the Metal Zone, and maybe like a Boss Super Overdrive in front of it that would make the Metal Zone sound a little less processy. The last time I picked up a Metal Zone, I was like, oh yeah, this is great. I'm like, wow, that is awful. It had this kind of lack of bottom end. But somehow I made it work.
If the video game Guitar Hero came around and asked for just one Treble Charger song that you could submit so people could get their plastic guitars and play along, which Treble Charger song do you submit? Red's got some cool parts and some cool riffs. What do you think you submit?
I would say maybe American Psycho, because it has that
catchy riff. Yeah.
That catchy riff, with the electric mistress flanger.